these quiet moments of solitude, I hear you. For years I drowned out the sound. I wandered through an endless maze with no beginning or end. I wrote letters with invisible ink to an unknown address. No one replied. Then I heard you. I don't remember when or where it was, but now it's all I can hear. Everything is clear. Everything makes sense. It wasn't always this way. The reason I started travelling in the first place was because I needed to get away from everything. I needed to get away from my job, I needed to get away from my friendships, my relationships, pretty much everything, because I was really suffocating, and I had this urge to just escape and to run away, or not run away, or run towards something different. I needed to get everything that had become my life as far away as possible so that I could start something new, I guess. I started to meet people from different backgrounds when I was working in London, and they had travelled or they were from different parts of the world, so I kept hearing stories and I kept hearing about their experiences, so it took away some of the mystique that comes with travel, so I wasn't necessarily afraid of doing it. That really just helped me make that big decision to actually go out there and start this journey. I travelled alone for most of the first trip, which was 6 months around Asia. And the reason I did that was I needed to clear my mind and I needed to get away from everything, which obviously meant that I had to leave all my friends and my family and everything, my established life, the life that I had created for myself. I had to just almost put it to one side so that I could start rebuilding from zero, taking everything and starting from scratch personally. I knew in 6 months I was going to see so much and meet so many people and have so many great experiences that I couldn't rely on my memory to retain all that information. So I bought a camera so that I could photograph everything day to day, just basically documenting the trip so that I could write a book about it one day, or sit back and kind of reflect on it when I'm older, or show my friends. So I started doing that, and then I started filming things as well, and it was really just a process of, I was on my own for a lot of the time, and I was in amazing places and lots of things were happening, and I had a camera, so I was documenting it all. And it wasn't just documenting. After a while I was trying to be very artistic and kind of really not just capture a beautiful moment, but also capture some of the elements that were happening inside me. There was a lot of change going on, and I was trying to capture imagery that not just explained how I was feeling, how the environment was, but all kinds of things. I was trying to tell all different sides of the story. So I didn't really realise that cameras were going to be so influential, and I'm glad I bought one in the end, because if I hadn't, I really don't know what I'd be doing now with my life, because it's such a kind of, I can't remember a time when I didn't use cameras almost all the time. And I think that trip was really the catalyst for it all. I think the greatest memory from my first journey was just the feeling of freedom, the feeling that I could be this person, I could be the version of myself that I've always wanted to be. I didn't have to be this unhappy person in a job which was getting me down, and surrounding myself with negative people and people who were ultimately holding me back. I could expand, I could, meet new people, I could have adventures, I could go anywhere in the world and survive and enjoy it. And I could also document all those things with my camera. So those were the highlights, really. It was learning that I had a skill for photography and for filmmaking. It was building my confidence, it was meeting new people, it was having adventures, good and bad, because it's nostalgia can play with your mind and you think everything was perfect, but there were some scary moments on those journeys, and I remember them, and they're good stories to tell you and for your friends down the pub, but not for this documentary, thank you. I had this shadow over me, which was the doom of returning to the life that I was living beforehand. So there was a kind of a real bitter pill to swallow, knowing that I had to come back and face reality, because traveling wasn't real. It wasn't something I could do forever. I knew I had to go back to work, and I really wasn't looking forward to it. And I think the few months after that return, that was some of the worst months of my life. And I acted, I'm not happy with how I acted during that time. I was acting like an idiot because I was torn between two worlds. I really wanted to be traveling again, but I was back in this kind of disillusioned world, but I wasn't the same person. The person who left was not the person who came back. The first day back, when I went back to my office and I clocked in and I went through the old routines, and everybody was the same, and the journey was the same, the people on the train were the same, the weather was the same, everything felt like a kind of a bad dream that I'd returned to, and I just wanted to wake up. I wanted to wake up on a beach in Southeast Asia and take some photographs and write some poetry and film something and meet a stranger and have an adventure and wake up in a place I've never heard of and just live that kind of a free existence and be happy. Memories of a place where I retraced footsteps in sand as it slipped through my hand, fueled by desolate beats as I walked through streets, unknown and far from home as the rumble of text on phone bristled through muscle, then bone. Distortion clouded my way to a new day as feelings of fright made my lungs tight. I fastened a seatbelt for a journey to a place I couldn't trace as the walls inside started to breach, flooded by past indiscretions and blackened reflections in mirrors shattered by dreams. It was the end of a beginning. In a slow motion waltz with sin and the sinner, I was no longer the beginner. The days came and went. The sun rose and set. I was home, standing at the front door, sand in my hand, trying to understand these memories of sand. I had to go travelling again, and once I'd returned and been back for a little while, I really couldn't see any other way of progressing without going away again. So I decided to start planning again, and I planned a trip to the Americas because I'd never been, and I really wanted to explore Central and South America primarily. And it became my my light at the end of the tunnel, you know. But it was a long gap between the trips, and but I had to go again because I felt the first one was just the first chapter in my change. I needed more time on my own. I needed more time in places around the world to really open that part of my heart and soul up, so that it really just flourishes and drowns out all the negativity inside me that was kind of, you know, residing there as a kind of like an echo from everything that had happened in my past. Travelling around the Americas was a very different experience to Asia. I think I was more cautious this time. I think in Asia I was maybe a bit kind of over adventurous, and I got myself into situations that were regrettable, and you know, my personal safety I compromised because I had a carefree attitude. I think it was just a completely intoxicating feeling. This time I was slightly more reserved, and it was a bit more of an introspective experience and more of a spiritual experience travelling around Latin America. I was maybe more cautious with who I met and who I spent time with, because I wanted to make the most of my journey, and I wanted to spend the time with quality people rather than just another random person who means virtually nothing to me. So I was more selective because I think I was more confident, so I could be on my own and not feel insecure. I could just be, that would be fine, yeah, it's not gonna be an issue for me. Whereas the first time I think I was needing more, I was a bit more needy. I needed more people to kind of help me enjoy myself, whereas I was enjoying myself just by being myself and doing my own thing in the Americas. I don't know, I chose Latin America because I felt like I didn't want to go back to Asia straight away, and it was another continent, it was another expedition, it was another journey into the unknown, and meeting new people, and I really embraced the creative experience as much as the travelling, because I wanted to make a film about it. I wanted to document my trip for myself, for my family, for my friends, so they could understand what I was doing and where I was going and how I was feeling. I think in the second trip I wrote a lot more poetry because I felt a bit more free in myself, and obviously I was making the documentary for my own personal viewing about that trip, and that became very theatrical and very kind of dramatic, and I was almost playing up certain things that happened to kind of create this almost overinflated version of what really happened to me. So I guess it was the early stages of me thinking about making films in a theatrical sense, making fictional films, creating drama, creating intrigue and interesting things happening for an audience to watch. You know, my attitudes were changing because I was witnessing real people around the world. I wasn't just seeing it on the TV and having this kind of stereotype rammed down my throat. I was meeting people from very kind of different backgrounds, other travellers, but also people from very poor backgrounds who I became friends with in countries where they don't have the privileges that people in England have. And they have real issues, you know, like it made me realise that my problems were very, very small. And people in England have a really, really fortunate existence because we have a state that can look after us and give us healthcare, and if we're unemployed we can be looked after, whereas in other countries around Latin America they don't have that, and people are really struggling and have real problems, and yet they have this incredible soul and incredible life and a real zest for life, even though they've got all these struggles. It's almost as if having the poverty as a real issue for them, it almost strengthens them, and I think it definitely changed my outlook, and it made me complain so much less about my life. And when I came home I appreciated a lot of things that I'd taken for granted, and I definitely stopped complaining a lot. I mean, maybe about the weather, but I'm English, so, you know, what can I do? The reason I was documenting everything is because I wanted to remember this. I wanted to remember this time in my life, because I knew the years before this had happened, really, I don't think my life had been very eventful. I don't think much had really happened of a note. You know, I couldn't really say what were the highlights for the previous 7 or 8 years prior to going travelling. There weren't really, I don't think there was much really to talk about, and I felt like these journeys and this period of change this was my highlight reel. This was my moment where I really needed to remember this. I needed to document it, I needed to remember it, and at some point in the future I knew I was going to use this footage for something. But saying that, as much as I'd had some really positive experiences, I did also kind of get sidetracked. I think I perhaps made mistakes with relationships. I think I kind of became intoxicated sometimes. You travel, you meet women, and there's moments where you lose perspective on where you are and what you're doing, and you can kind of get wrapped up in a kind of a relationship that isn't really real, because it's attached to this amazing experience. You feel like it's an answer, or it's something that could lead you to the answers you want. I lost the focus on my creativity, but I got it back. It was just, I think I was still learning, and I was still trying to kind of enjoy myself. I was still trying to be creative, but sometimes we all make mistakes, and I think that trip, there were mistakes made, but despite it taking me away from what I was ultimately trying to achieve by travelling, I don't regret those moments, but I do feel like perhaps I put too much energy into things that really weren't in my best interest. But like I said, it's all about learning, and if you learn from mistakes, that's the most valuable experience. Making a mistake and learning and never making it again. There would be a time when I would want to take all these memories and create something to explain how I was feeling while I was walking the earth, how I was changing, and how the world was changing me, and how I was having a spiritual journey as much as a physical journey. Where am I going? What have I seen? When will I wake from this twilight dream? And the nights came, dripping colour into my eyes as neon haze covered the skies. A slowly soaring musical beat, a warm glow in an endless repeat. Night to day and day to night, lost in a maelstrom of colour and light. It's time to go. It's time to run. Open the door, then wait for the sun. In the beginning I was broken. The pieces of a man lay scattered across my bedroom floor. As time passed and journeys came and went, the pieces began to melt into the wooden grain. They gathered like raindrops in a sunken street, slowly merging into one, laced with the memories of who they once were, but unafraid to begin again. They joined and began to rise, shimmering in reflected dreams of silent monologues. Each time I returned, they had grown. They soared toward the light, to the window, to freedom, yearning to be set free. But the pieces were not foreign or unknown to me. Each one was a memory, a failure, a lost battlefield where I lay weary, unable to continue the good fight. But in those defeats my strength was born.
The pieces were now strong, with a force that could change the world, my world. It was my mirror, my reflection, my change. I was ready.
Educationally, I progressed again from the second trip, which was really a big moment in terms of my development. But by the third trip, my skills had really gone through the roof, and I felt I was pretty much at a professional level. I wasn't, but I was kind of very close, I think, and my skills as an editor were very good, and I think like filming wise I was becoming more experimental, and I was trying all kinds of things, and I was creating more of a cinematic feel with this film. So my education was developing, and the photography also. Again, I was editing films, but I was also editing photographs, and I was thinking about lighting more, I think, and composition, and setting a scene, really, not just taking a snapshot. I was contemplating every shot and thinking how the light would affect it, and how the characters within the photograph would impact people when they're looking at it. I did question during that trip whether it was actually travel that I was addicted to, because initially I thought it was, but then I thought the main reason I'm travelling now is because I want to make a film about it. So I loved travel, and I loved making films, and I also loved photography, and I loved writing poetry about travel. So it was kind of, I was reflecting about what I was really doing, was I actually going to the Middle East to see the Middle East? Was I going to Asia to really see Asia? Or was I just going because it was a different landscape and a different culture, and it would give me scope to kind of create something visually and with a different soundtrack that would kind of suit different ethnicities and different kind of cultures. And I really do think that I started travelling and I was addicted to the experience of travelling. But I think somewhere along the road, it changed. It changed from travel addiction to film addiction, because I wanted to travel because I wanted to film it. So it definitely, I think, but at this point I knew that as much as I did absolutely love travelling, it was really more about making films for me. And I think that was a key moment, because I think that was a moment when I realised that I didn't need to keep doing this. I didn't need to keep running away from my job. I could change my job, and I could change it to become a filmmaker and a photographer. I didn't think that was impossible anymore, and I thought, if I enjoy making films and I enjoy taking photographs more than I enjoy travelling, then if I can make my personal life, doing those things for a living, then I would be incredibly happy. So that was a real kind of turning point during that trip, where I realised that this was actually something really kind of fundamental in my future, not just a travel gimmick. It was actually something I could do for a living, and it really that was really the moment when I left my job mentally. It took a couple of years later, but that was really the point where I realised this was actually going to happen. I think travelling is something everybody should do if they can. I think it's a great experience. I think it really changes you, and it's a cliche, of course, but it does, because when you're at home, you have a job, you might have a partner, you have friends, you have this you are playing a role. You've created this sort of place for yourself, and you fulfill different elements of that role. What travelling does, especially going on your own, what it does, it takes all those things that you've become, and it just puts them to one side for a little while, and that's okay. You're allowed to do that. It puts them away, and it just gives you a freedom to, if you want to be different, you can be different, because no one's going to judge you, and no one is going to say, oh, but that's not you, because they don't know who you are. And that's why travelling is so good for trying to figure out, if you need change in your life and you need to make things better for yourself, I don't think anything is better than travelling, because in order to make an intelligent decision about your life, you need to take yourself away from everything. All the noise and all the words and all the kind of people giving you advice. Wipe the whole canvas clean and sit and enjoy that silence, and the silence will start to create something. You know, in silence is where all great things are created. And I think if you want to change who you are, or if you want to revert yourself back to who you really wanted to be, go travelling. And be happy in yourself and do what you want to do. It's not going to be easy, of course not. But if it's easy, then it's not really worth doing, I don't think. I know a lot of people who travel, and it's a very, very addictive thing. And a lot of people who travel generally don't enjoy their jobs, so they have a very, very depressing job that they hate, and they work and they work and they save their money, and months pass, they plan, and then they go for like a 2 or 3 month trip, and they have an amazing time, and they have so many great memories, but they come home and they go back to the same job, and it's the same cycle, and then they work for another year, do another trip, etc., and it never ends. So, you know, the majority of their time that they spend in their life is spent unhappy. And that was really something I just wanted to change. I didn't want to just have this small highlight reel every now and again. I wanted my life to be the highlight reel. Yeah, I wanted to feel how I felt when I was travelling every day. And I think that's why I said that was the final trip, because I thought, if I continue doing this, I'll be doing this for the next 15 years. I'll have clocked up more air miles than like the Queen probably, but you know, I would be no closer to being really happy. So I had to end travelling after that trip. The thing about travelling is, like, I'm very fortunate to have done it 3 times, and I have so many incredible memories. I have made so many great friends. I've seen things I can't even believe I saw, and I've had moments where I was almost an out-of-body experience, where I was actually thinking to myself, this can't be real, this is too good. And it's not every day, don't get me wrong. There's times when you're travelling and you spend 2 or 3 days in a city and you're just dying of boredom because it's bloody awful. But there are so many good moments, and I would never trade those moments for anything. Those memories define me. Those memories made me who I am, and they gave me the ability to change my life, to change my career, to change from being a negative to a positive, to change from being unhappy to happy, to change from being kind of a sterile corporate admin drone to being a kind of a creative artist. Yeah, I would never trade those memories, because they're mine and they're unique, and I could only have them at that time, because every trip's different, every moment's different when you're out there, so you can't get them back. And I would never trade them, because they are the definition of who I am today.
In these quiet moments of solitude, I hear you. Everything is clear. Everything makes sense. It wasn't always this way.